All right, well, I told you guys I had a fun fact, okay? And I don't lie. I tell the truth, and so I have a fun fact for you. And it's actually, believe it or not, it's not just a fun fact, it's actually a really embarrassing fact about me. Something that I like, something that I enjoy doing and watching that I'm ashamed of, okay? It's on Netflix, and it's called The Great British Bake Off. I'm not gonna lie. Right now you're thinking like, I cannot believe it. Yes, Matthew Fabarez, I like The Great British Bake Off. And if you've never heard of it before, it's on Netflix, and it's this show that literally they put all these British people in this big tent out in the middle of nowhere in England, and they bake stuff like pastries and cakes and all this other stuff like that. And here, to be completely honest, I have hated Food Channel. I have hated baking shows my whole life. My mom used to watch it all the time, and I thought it was the stupidest thing ever. But for some reason, this show, I don't know why, I don't know how, but I, for some reason, like The Great British Bake Off. These British people baking pastries against each other and getting eliminated in these challenges. I can't explain why I like it, but I think part of the reason that I like it, it's not even really necessarily the show. I don't think it's necessarily the baking or the pastries or the British people. I know it's not the British people. I'd rather not watch British people. But anyway, I know it's not all those things. I think part of the reason that I like this show is because my wife likes this show. And so this was a show she was obsessed with. She would come home like on her lunch break to come home to like heat up stuff from the fridge, reheat stuff to watch The Great British Bake Off during her lunch break. Like, that's how much she's committed to, and that's how much she likes this show. And so I've had to sit there, and yes, sometimes I have my ESPN app up on my lap, but a lot of the times I'm there. I'm actually involved. Can you agree? Like, I'm actually like invested in these competitors and these people baking stuff. And if you know me, I don't like baking. I don't like cooking. I don't like any of those things. But for some reason, I like this show. And I think it's because my wife likes this show. And I think it's because she enjoys it so much. I sit there next to her as she's enjoying this show, and I just can't help but enjoy it too because she enjoys it so much. I wish it worked that way with like Laker games and like sports and stuff. I wish maybe she would enjoy those things as much as I do. That didn't necessarily rub off on her yet. But I for some reason like The Great British Bake Off, and I think that this is something that happens in life. When someone that you care about likes something, cares about something, does something, you begin to start to care and like those things right there along with them. I think it happens in life all the time. You guys go to school, it's called peer pressure, right? Someone does something, and you, because you like them, because you want their attention, or because you think they're really cool, you start to do those same things. You start to dress those same way. Or maybe you have a little brother. I've got a little brother. Guess what? In high school, he started to dress like me. He started to like talk like me. He started like he was doing baseball, and then he quit baseball because I was playing golf because he wanted to play golf with me. Like, he just copied me. And if you have a little brother, your little brother he probably copies you, or your little sister does the same thing. And that's what happens when you care about someone. You start to do the same things. You start to like the same things. You start to enjoy and participate in the same things that they do. And I think for the Christian life, it's actually no different. If you're a Christian, by definition, a Christian is someone that has a relationship with God, or a relationship with Christ. So what that means is when you care about Christ, it means when you love Christ, when you have a relationship with Him, then you start to actually care about the things that Christ cares about. Just like that would happen at school, just like that happens with your little brother or your little sister, or you're married, your wife or your husband or something like that. It happens like that for Christians. The older you get in your Christian faith, you start to love the same things that Christ loved. You start to do the same things that Christ did. You start to talk the way that Christ did. And one of those things that the Jesus, He cares so much about is this thing called love. And that's actually where we are now in our series here. We talked about what the fruit of the Spirit is last week. We talked about not only what it is, but why we should invest in the fruit of the Spirit, why we should put on the fruit of the Spirit. So the first one is love, and that's something that Christ, He cares so much about. It's something that He exemplified so much. This is something now, if you're a Christian, you're calling yourself a Christian, you say you have a relationship with God, this is something that you now have to be doing along with Him. So I want you guys to turn open to 1 John chapter 3 with me. 1 John chapter 3. We're going to look at 1 John 3:16, not John 3:16. I know you know that one. If you got a Timothy award, you know John 3:16. But if you have a Timothy award, you might know 1 John 3:16 as well. 1 John 3:16. We're going to look at verse 16 through 18. We're going to see what God has to say about your life, what God has to say about the way that you show love to other people. 1 John chapter 3. It's right there at the end of your Bible. You turn to Revelation, you flip to the maps in the back, you turn a couple pages to the left. 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, you get 1 John chapter 3. Look at verse 16 here with me. John writes, "By this we know love, that he, being Christ, he laid down his life for us. We ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. If anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and truth." This section, these 3 short verses here, have a lot to say about the way you need to live your life, a lot to say about the way that you need to love others. Before we even dig into this passage, I want to define what we're talking about when we say love. We're talking in a biblical sense. We talk about biblical love. What are we talking about? Well, the idea of this word here that we translate love, it's the idea of this sacrificial, this self-sacrificing love. So love, one of the definitions I wrote is the desire for the good of others and giving of ourselves for their sake. There's this idea of sacrifice. There's this idea of you putting aside what you want, putting aside your desires, your time, your effort, your reputation for the sake of other people because you care deeply about them. You see, the Jews, they had a great idea of what a sacrifice was. If you read the Old Testament, if you've read the Old Testament before, you see all these different sacrifices. All these people, they had to bring their goats or their birds or their livestock or their bulls or whatever. They had to bring this to the temple and to sacrifice this. And so basically, this was their livelihood. This was their money, if you will. So it's like you think of you work at a, let's just say a bank. That's an easy one. You work at a bank. It's like you now bringing money to God and sacrificing it, giving away for nothing. You can't sell the bull. You can't sell the goat. You can't sell the birds or whatever you have. You had to give it up for free. You do that as an offering to God. And so that's the idea of sacrifice. You giving something expensive for, well, in this case, God, but in this case, 1 John chapter 3, we're talking about sacrificing ourselves for other people. You see, this is so different than the world's definition of love. The world's definition of love, there's such a wide spectrum of what they use the word love for. Like, it would make complete, total, grammatical sense if I said, I love my wife. And you'd be like, okay, that makes sense. You should do that. Like, that's a good thing to do. And you understand what that means. But then a lot of you guys know me. You know what else I love. And I love, and Kai knows what I'm going to say. I love Del Taco. You guys know I love Del Taco so much. But guess what? When I say I love Del Taco, you understand exactly what I'm saying. It makes sense when I say I love Del Taco. Why? Because Del Taco is so good, and that's why it makes sense. But it also makes grammatical sense because you can say that you love Del Taco or you love, whatever you like, ramen or sushi or whatever, boba that Trisha likes or whatever it is. But you can say you love those things. But when I say I love my wife, you would understand those things to be 2 different situations, 2 different things. I love, obviously, my wife way more than I love the red burrito off the dollar menu at Del Taco. I love her way more than that burrito. Why? Because that's just a different kind of love. And so the Bible, or the world rather, it has this wide spectrum of what love is, and the idea that it comes from your feelings, enjoying the presence of something. I enjoy the presence of a red dollar burrito off the Del Taco menu. I enjoy that in my mouth, and believe it or not, I actually enjoy it in my stomach because now my stomach is used to Del Taco, and so I don't get a stomachache when I eat Del Taco because I eat there so often. But it's a feeling. I care deeply about that burrito, or I care deeply, way more deeply, about my wife. And you see, the world, it's feelings based, and then also it's temporary. So I could feel this way about Del Taco, but guess what? I felt this way about Taco Bell like last year. Like, I love Taco Bell so much because I was in Kentucky and that was all I could eat, and I loved it so much. But now my focus has switched. It was temporary, and guess what? We live in Orange County. It's like the most temporary marriage situation in like all of America. I was reading stats this week that the divorce rate in Orange County, like, just think about this for a minute. The divorce rate in Orange County, I was reading that it was up to 60, 70, or 75% of marriages. Just like ponder that for a minute. That means like 3 out of 4 marriages that happen, like weddings you see, like you could say 3 out of 4 times you could say, yeah, you're going to get divorced one day. Like that's where we live in Orange County. And it's unbelievable. One day you're saying, I love you, I'm going to commit the rest of my life to you, and I'm never going to leave you. And the next day you're like, you're boring, I don't want to be with you anymore, I'm just going to leave. It's a temporary thing that the world talks about when it talks about love. But the biblical love, it's a complete different situation. It's a choice, it's a sacrifice, and Jesus showed us this love. You look back at 1 John chapter 3, look at verse 16. He showed us this love and what it looks like. Verse 16, it says, by this we know love, that he laid down his life for us. What it's saying here, what John's trying to say here is that Jesus loved you so much that he sacrificed himself for you. So I want you guys to write that down for point number one. Remember what Christ sacrificed for you. That's so important that we understand that before we talk about loving other people. We need to understand, remember what Christ sacrificed for you, how much he loved you, how much he laid down his life, his desires for your sake. This love is this idea of sacrifice. Jesus showed us what that looks like by laying down his life for us. And you see, Jesus, he gave up a lot to come here to this planet. We talk about it on Christmas, around Christmas time. We use the big word incarnation. When Jesus, he took on flesh. Carne asada. You love carne asada, and I do too. Do they do that? They do that at Del Taco, the carne asada fries, right? I don't know. I don't get that. But anyway, carne, I don't know how we're talking about carne asada. But carne is Jesus taking on flesh in incarnation. He puts on flesh. He's in heaven. He's sitting at the right-hand throne of God. He's in this glorious throne room, if you will, in heaven, being worshipped every day. And guess what? He could have stayed there. He would have been totally fine to stay in heaven. And he had a great setup there. I mean, he was getting worshipped day in and day out, sitting at the right-hand throne of God. But what did he do? He put on flesh. He became creation for your sake and for my sake. I want you guys to see this in Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2. Turn a little bit to the left here in your Bibles. Philippians chapter 2. I turn to this passage, I feel like, all the time. Philippians chapter 2. Gives us a great picture of what Jesus did by not even dying, but just by coming to earth and putting on flesh. We need to feel the weight of that and see how much he sacrificed for your sake and for my sake. Philippians chapter 2, look at verse 5 here with me. It says, "Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who though he," being Jesus, though he was in the form of God, he did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped. Basically, he was saying, I'm going to let this go, but he emptied himself, verse 7, by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and then being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Look at that. He did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped. Basically, he was willing to let that go. He was willing to let that position that he had in heaven, he was willing to let that go for your sake and for my sake. He put on the form of a servant here. He emptied himself. He was the creator, and now he became the creation. And I think we think about that all the time. We're so comfortable with that idea. We take that for granted that Jesus put on flesh, that we celebrate at Christmas time. Jesus came. He born in Bethlehem. He born in a manger, and it's great. You know, Christmas time, it's awesome. Jesus came. He came to earth. He put on flesh. Great. But we don't understand how much of a sacrifice that was. He was the creator, and he became the created. I was trying to think of an idea of what this an illustration of what this would look like for you being in charge of something, you being the king of something, and then you now becoming one of those things that you are, that is in charge to you, or that you are in charge of. And I know that you're going to laugh, but the one thing I just kept thinking about was Fortnite, okay? And you guys act too cool. You're like, yeah, I don't play Fortnite anymore because that's like an old game. Like I play, whatever, Red Dead Redemption or whatever your stupid games you play. It's not stupid. I mean, that's not stupid. I'll play them with you. I'll play Brawl Stars or whatever. But if you think about like, let's talk about Fortnite for a minute, okay? You've got your squad, okay? And you guys are all dropping. You're dropping it, I don't know, Tilted Towers or something. I don't know if that's a good spot. But you drop there. You've got your squad, and your squad it's in trouble. But your squad, for some reason, this is not really Fortnite. You're in charge of all four of your guys, and so you're in control of the whole thing. But then you, the player, playing an animated game that's like not a real game, it's fiction. What if you're sitting there with your squad's in trouble, and you say, I'm gonna go be in this squad. Like I'm gonna drop. Like me personally, like I'm gonna drop in, and I'm gonna go fight. And what if you're sitting there, you're in Fortnite, a bunch of animated people, and then you're sitting there, you're fighting off these people, and then you're like, okay, I'm willing to, not only, now I've gone from human to now an animation, but now like I'm going to go from human to animation to now I'm going to sacrifice myself for my team. And you're like, I'm willing to go into this game, and I'm willing to die. Like I'm actually, like me, like my life, I'm willing to be killed. You'd be like that, like if that makes any sense, you're a girl, you're like, this is stupid, this is ridiculous, I'm going to walk out of here, whatever. But just think about the craziness of what that would be. You, think about this for a minute. You being willing to die for your Fortnite team. Would you be willing to die for your Fortnite team? No. Like you literally, like death. Like you are gone. Like you're not coming back to earth. Right? No, right? Like I would never stoop to that level is what you would say. But guess what Jesus did? He stooped to our level. He was the creator. He was in charge. He stepped down to your level, emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, and then he went even farther than that. And what did he do? He sacrificed his life for the sake of us. You see, he sacrificed his position in heaven, and then when he came to earth, he sacrificed his desire. He sacrificed his will. Matthew 20:28 says, "For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." What we're saying here is that when he came to this planet, he came to put his desire below others' desire. I mean, think about it. You read the Gospels, you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you read, what does he do time and time again? There's a blind man sitting outside. He's begging for money. What does he do? He says, boom, he gives him eyesight. There's a dude sitting there. He's lame. He's never walked in his life. His feet are crippled. He says, boom, get up and walk. These friends, they open up this roof where Jesus is teaching. They drop a paralytic down to him. And Jesus says, this guy who's never walked in his life, he says, yeah, get up and walk. What is he doing there? He's putting his will, his desire below those other people, and he's serving these people. He's not just being a part of the squad, but now he's serving the squad. He's going one step lower. What does he do right at the last week of his life? There's this wash basin. There's this servant girl that's supposed to wash these disciples' feet. And what does he do? He says, no, I'm going to put the towel on. I'm going to scrub your feet, Simon Peter. I'm going to wash your toenails, Judas. I'm going to do that for you. I'm going to put myself under you, putting my will, my desires under you. Then he spent a lot of his time with people that were rejects. He spent a lot of his time with sinners and tax collectors and lepers and people that didn't have any place in society. Why? Because he subverted his will, his desires under other people, taking the form of a servant, not just creator to created, but now a created. Now I'm going to be a created and I'm going to serve other createds. He put his desires, his will under others. And then ultimately, obviously, what did he do? He sacrificed his life. He's willing to obey God to the point of death. He was willing to die for your sake and for mine. And I think, like I said earlier, we're so comfortable with that. Like, Jesus died for my sin. Like, whatever. He died on the cross, and that's great. And, I can be saved, and awesome. But, do you realize, the sacrifice that it actually took him to get to that point? You don't need to turn there, but Luke 22, he's in the garden, and he's praying. He's praying. He's praying to God right before he knows the night he's going to die. Think about this for a minute. It's 10 o'clock tonight, but you're going to die tomorrow. Think about the stress and the anxiety and the crazy situation that he's in. He's sitting there. He's praying. He's asking God. He says, if you remove this cup from me, please, I don't want to do this. I don't want to die. But then he says, nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. He's willing to say, God, even though this is going to cost me. And I just remember we were reading through the EDW, and we're in Acts now, but when we were in John, I was just sitting there reading it fresh. I feel like I've read it a million times, but just the crucifixion story, I was thinking about the phony trial that these people put on. They brought in these false witnesses to say these things about Jesus. Then what do they do? Obviously, is famous. What do? They put a crown of thorns on his head. Think about when you touch a thorn, a rose, you're messing in the rose bush or something, you get a thorn, you just if you're going to let that touch you, you're going to barely let it touch you and not really touch you. But what they did is they put that on his head and then they squeezed it in. They pushed it in. So he's bleeding. And then what does he do? He gets whipped, he gets mocked, he gets spit on. And then ultimately they hang him on a cross, not just give him the drugs to die peacefully. No. They put nails through his hands and through his feet. And he died a terrible death, an awful death, a humiliating death for you and for me. And we talk about that Jesus died, whatever. Do you realize how big of a sacrifice that is? How major that is? The step that he had to go, stoop to that level to die for you, a created, not just serve you, wash your feet, but go a step farther and die for your sake and for my sake. See, that's the gospel message. That's the good news, that Jesus would do that so that you could now have a relationship with him, so that you can now be a Christian. The word Christian literally means little Christ. So now you can have a relationship with him. Like he did that for you and for me. We need to remember what Christ sacrificed for us. We can't get comfortable with it. We can't just hear it like it's old news. And keep in mind, this whole time when Jesus did this, he did this while you were not like a good person. You weren't doing good things. You weren't, obeying your parents, but like while you were enemies, Romans 5 says, while you were yet sinners, Christ died for you. So you're not lovable at this point, and then Jesus, he stoops to that level to crush himself with you. Don't hear that like it's old news. Don't just be like, yeah, I get it. Like, I know Christ sacrificed for me. He died on the cross, sure. Don't hear that like it's old news. I remember I told you guys a story a couple weeks ago, or I guess more like a couple months ago, when I went to the Grand Canyon. You guys remember that story? For those who didn't hear, I went to the Grand Canyon with a couple of my friends from school, and I was coming back to California to my wedding. So I got a bunch of other guys with me, or two other guys, not a bunch, and they really wanted to go to the Grand Canyon. And I've been to the Grand Canyon many times. It's whatever. I mean, it's cool. Like, yeah, my dad would always say, it's just a hole in the ground. Like, that's all it is. And it's a big hole in the ground, but ultimately it's just a hole in the ground. And so I've been there. It's not really a big deal, but my buddies, they really wanted to go. One guy from Kentucky, one guy from Ohio. So they were going to have no chance to ever see the Grand Canyon again, probably. And so we made that trek up to the Grand Canyon. You got to pay like $50 just to get in the door, like just to get past the gate. And we get there, we bring one friend who's been there before, one friend who hasn't. We bring him up to the edge, and I've got one friend sitting there at the rim of the Grand Canyon crying. Like, he was crying because he was just so overwhelmed with the beauty of the Grand Canyon. Then my other friend, I didn't even get a word out of him for like a minute and a half or 2 minutes because he was just speechless. He couldn't even talk. And so I've got a friend here crying. Well, he's just a weird guy, so let me just put that. Not normal person doesn't cry when they see the Grand Canyon for the first. No, that was the second time. That was the friend that had seen it before. And I'm sitting here with my hands in my pockets, like I took a quick selfie, and I was like, all right, let's get out of here. Like, I'm done. Like, it's just the Grand Canyon. It's just a hole in the ground. But I was sitting there with two friends that were just amazed by the beauty and the majesty of the Grand Canyon. And I was sitting there like I didn't care. And I think oftentimes we sit there on the edge of the Grand Canyon. We look at the gospel, we look at what Christ sacrificed for us, and we're like me with our hands in your pockets, like, yeah, whatever, cool, not really a big deal. But we should be more like the friend that cried, and more like the friend that couldn't talk for 2 minutes, because think about, like, if I'm being honest, the Grand Canyon's pretty amazing. Okay, I'll give you that. It's amazing. It's cool. But the gospel, it's so much cooler. It's so much more majestic. It's so much more amazing. It's so much more glorious. We need to sit there on the rim of the Grand Canyon, if you will, and we need to marvel. We need to be wowed. We need to be amazed. Don't just hear this like it's old news. Like, oh yeah, I get it. I understand Jesus died. We talk about it at Christmas. We talk about it at Easter. No. This is like a big, big deal. We need to stop, marvel, praise God for the gospel. Praise God for what Christ sacrificed for us. And I think it's so interesting when these biblical authors, a lot of them, when they talk about God, when they talk about doctrine, when they talk about theology, a lot of times they end the book with this word. You see in your ESV Bible, you see the phrase or the title, it says doxology. The word doxology is the idea of this section where this writer praises God or worships God, just wowed by God. And I think it's so interesting. This happens in Hebrews, it happens in Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, and it's at the end of this amazing display of doctrine and theology. And what do the biblical authors do? They end it by saying, wow, this is amazing. God, you are awesome. You are great. And I think we need to do the same thing. But also, I think we don't just need to stand there and just be amazed by it, which we do need to do, but now we need to use this as fuel, use this as a motivation to love other people. 1 John chapter 3, what it says, he by this we know love, that he laid down his life for us. What's our job now? Not just to stand there and be wowed, which we should do. We need to use that wow, use that amazement, use that marvel, and now be motivated to love others. By this we know love, that he laid down his life for us. Now we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. We need to lay down our lives for the brothers. I mean, you see, 1 John, it's all about you getting to love other people, you obeying the Bible, you showcasing that love. I mean, so this is, I mean, if you will, it's like the thesis of 1 John. We need to realize that we need to use this as motivation for us to love other people. Guys, write that down for point number 2. Write that down for point number 2. Sacrifice yourselves for others today. If Jesus Christ sacrificed himself for you, your job now is to now sacrifice yourself for other people. Your wants, your desires, your preferences. You need to sacrifice your life for others. Use Christ's sacrifice as an example and a motivation for you to do the same to other people. If you guys are still in Philippians, if you aren't, then flip over there. But if you are, look up to verse number 3. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. We read verse 5 through 8, but verse 3 through 4, it says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility," the idea of you putting yourself under people, that's the idea of humility. "Count others as more significant, as more important than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others." This is what it means for you to sacrifice yourself for others. You putting their desires, their significance as higher than you. We need to fight our selfishness, because guess what? We are so selfish. And I think I don't have to explain to you how selfish you are, because you know how selfish you are, don't you? You know, if you could do whatever you want, you'd eat whatever you want. If you could have all the money in the world, you would spend it on whatever you want. You wish you could sit there and play video games all day. You want to do whatever you want. If you could go to the mall and you had an unlimited credit card, you'd buy whatever you want, because we are all about us. We are all about our selfish desires. But the idea of this right here, the sacrifice, this laying down your life for others, is the complete opposite, saying, guess what? I'm going to look to other people as more important than me. I'm going to say, guess what? I walk into CSM on a Sunday morning, I look around at all these people, and guess what? They are more important than me. I care about them more than I care about myself. And what does that look like? That looks like you now doing things for other people. That looks like you now talking to other people. I don't know if that's something that you do when you show up here. What do you just want to talk to your friends, the people that you know, the people that you're comfortable with. Sacrificing yourself, laying down your life, is saying, I'm willing to do this for anyone. I'm willing to put my preference, my reputation on the line to talk to that person that I don't know. When a new person comes in, do you sit there and like, well, I'm not going to talk to them. The leaders can do that. Matt can do that. No, your job is to do that. Your job is to lay down your life, your desires, your preferences for them. Something that I try to think through, and I'm not perfect at this, but sometimes I have to remind myself of this. Whenever I walk into a room, I want to be the least significant person in that room. That's a good mindset to have. You show up to church, I want to be the least significant person at my church. If you thought that, guess what? Your conversations on the patio, your conversations here would be a little different. Because what do when we get in a conversation? We talk about us. We talk about our week. We talk about how things are going for us. We don't talk about other people. We look to only our friends that we're comfortable with because they make us feel good. But we need to now say, okay, I'm willing to do this for others. I'm willing to lay down my life, my preferences for other people. Because guess what? You will do and you will serve whatever is most important to you. If that's yourself, you're going to make time for yourself. You're going to talk about yourself if it's all about you, if you are the most important thing. You serve whatever's most important. It happens all over life. I mean, the most important person to me in this world is my wife. So what do? My whole life is I want to serve her. I don't want to put her needs above my own. Guess what? I care about all you guys in here, but I don't care about you as much as I care about her. Sorry, I don't. You can leave. No, I'm just kidding. Don't leave. I care about you a lot, but guess what? I care about her more. I put her desires, her needs above anyone else's because I care about her most. And guess what? You do that to your parents, or your brother, whatever. You don't see a stranger on the street and say, man, like, I just want to do I'm going to leave my wife. I want to do everything to serve this random person on the street. You'd never do that. You'd be a weirdo if you did that. Why? Because they're not important to me, right? And you're going to serve. You're going to do whatever the person that you care about, you want to serve them and put their needs first. You serve whatever is most important to you. And so it starts with your mindset. It starts with you thinking about, I want to be the least significant person in this room. That needs to be your mindset. That's what it looks like to lay down your life for others. Verse 17, John here, he gives us an example If you look back at 1 John chapter 3, look at verse 17. He says, if anyone has the world's goods and he sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? John here, he gives us an example of this guy who sees someone else who has a need. He has the resources to meet that need. He has the resources to do and serve that person. But he puts his needs above theirs, and he sees the need, but he withholds whatever he can do to help that person. And I think this is a good reminder for us to serve people that are hard to serve, right? We see this guy, he's got the world's goods, he sees a brother in need, but yet it's all about him. It's all about what he can get out of life. It's not about him serving others. It's not about him sacrificing his reputation for other people. You need to sacrifice your reputation for others in this room. You need to sacrifice your reputation when you go home today. Because guess what? Your mom is the most important, your dad is the most important person in your house. You need to put your desires under them, right? Sacrificing your wants, your desires for them. You need to see them as more important than you. And guess what? That needs to be the same thing when you show up here. Talking to others, encouraging others, including them. What's the opposite of that? Bad-mouthing, making fun of, gossiping. Guess what? I hear a lot of that going on around here, don't I? It happens a lot. Why? Because it's selfish. It's something that's easy to do. It's fun to put someone else down and make them look stupid and make yourself look better, right? That feels good. That's something that your craving of selfish desire, that fulfills that desire. But this sacrifice is the opposite. You see someone in need. You see a new person. You see someone that's awkward or weird or someone that you don't get along with, and you say, no, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. That's the opposite, the complete opposite of what God calls you to do. Like I said earlier, Jesus, he washed the disciples' feet and he left out Judas, right? Because Judas was going to betray him. He didn't wash Judas' feet, right? No. He scrubbed his feet too. And he knew a couple hours later he was going to betray him and get him killed. He washed his enemies' feet. He served his enemies' feet. That was not comfortable for Jesus to do, was it? It wasn't fun for him to do that. But a lot of times we sit here and we're like, I'm just going to love the person that I think is cool, or the person that's my age, or the person that, gets along with me, or likes the same things I do. If Jesus can wash Judas's feet, someone that he knows is going to kill him, you can wash someone else's feet, if you know what I mean. You can serve someone else, even if they're weird. See, we've got friend groups. That's how it works. You got your group of friends, and you talk to them, and you joke with them. You've got your inside jokes with them. But when someone else comes, you're like, oh, well, they're not in my group of friends. Like, they're not in my clique. Like, they're not cool like me. They're weird. Like, they're awkward. Jesus washed Judas's feet. He's going to kill him. If Jesus can do that, you can talk to someone that's weird. Like, do you see the difference? Like, Jesus, he washed the guy that was going to kill him, his feet. And you're sitting here, I'm not going to wash their feet because they're weird. You see, we need to sacrifice our wants, our desires, our reputation, our stuff for others. And I don't want you to go away from this sermon and say, okay, well, I'm going to go talk to others better. I'm going to go treat them better with my words, and that's it. Like, I'm going to say, oh, I love you, Mom, or I love you, Dad, or I love you, friend, or whatever. I'm just going to leave it at that. That's how I'm going to love them. No, I mean, what's the word we keep using? Sacrifice, right? It's an action. Look down at verse 18. John here reminds us that love, it's an action. It's not a feeling. It's not a word. He says, little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and truth. Let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and truth. What he's trying to say here is don't just love other people by saying good things without doing anything. It's like trash talk. I don't know if you guys trash talk. I mean, we're playing knockout or something like that. Josh trash talk. Sorry, Josh. But he does trash talk. Okay, I went on the men's retreat yesterday. I did a little trash talking myself. So I was trash talking all these guys that I could beat them in ping pong. And so we went up to the rec room. I was like, yeah, dude, like I can definitely beat you. I know I can. We went up to the rec room. And I didn't win a game. Like, I didn't win a game. I lost every single game I played. Singles, doubles, like every game we played, I lost. But I went up there, I was so confident. I was like, yeah, dude, I'm going to beat you. Like, I got this. Like, I know you're trash. Like, I'm going to beat you in ping pong. And I didn't deliver. And that's the idea right here of loving in word or talk. It means nothing if you trash talk and you can't actually deliver. It means nothing. It's pointless. It's wasted words. See, biblical love, it's not something that you say, it's something that you do. You have to prove it by what you do. And I know you guys know that I like golf, and when I was in high school, I really, really liked golf, and I wanted to play in college. I wanted to be on a college team. I wanted to get recruited, and so I tried to do that. And I talked with coaches. I'd met coaches, and guess what? Every time I talked about, guess what? I really like golf. What did they ask me for? They said, okay, well, send me your stuff. Send me your statistics. Send me your scores. Because they wanted me to prove that I could have sat there and been like, I'm really good at golf. You should have me on my team. But guess what? It doesn't work like that. Right? You've got tape. If you're playing football or soccer, basketball, you got tape that you've got to prove how good you are. In my stats, they didn't prove enough. I never got recruited. I didn't play college golf. I wasn't good enough because I didn't have the goods to show for it. And so loving in word or talk is the idea of you saying something without being able to show it. The only way you get recruited onto a college team is by showing it with what you do. It's not about what you say, it's about what you do. And right here, love, it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing. Biblical love is not something that you say, it's something that you do. You want to respond in deed and truth. You want to actually put this to practice. So I want you guys to think about this. Maybe write this down right now. I'm going to love fill in the blank this week by doing fill in the blank. What are you actually going to do? Not what are you going to actually say to them or treat them, but what are you actually going to do to put their needs, their desires, their preferences above your own? What are you going to do? Not what are you going to say, but what are you going to do? I'm going to love in deed and truth this person in this way. See, if you're a Christian, you have to love other people. It's not a preference, it's a command. I love what Jesus says in John 13. This is after he washes his disciples' feet. He says, by this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. This is how people know that you're a Christian. This is how people know, okay, I know this person is different because they put others' needs before their own. They sacrifice themselves for other people. If you're a Christian, you have to love other people. And last week, we talked about fruit of the Spirit. We talked about it's something that now you put on to show that you're a Christian. Fruit, you look at a tree, you know if a tree is alive if it's got fruit hanging off of it. That's what fruit is in the Christian life. But I said also, I think fruit is a way that you can now push back the works of the flesh. In that passage, we looked at the works of the flesh and the fruit of the Spirit, and how the fruit of the Spirit, they can actually conquer the works of the flesh if we put on the fruit of the Spirit. And so maybe right now you are a hateful person, if you will. You always get mad. You always argue. You always are selfish. Do you know how you stop doing those things? I'm not going to be selfish this week. How well do you think your week's going to go if you I'm not going to be selfish this week? Like, what does that look like? How does that happen? You put on love. You put on something. You put on this love, and guess what? Now you're going to see change. Now you're going to see sin put off. You're not going to get angry. You're not going to be hateful. You're not going to, think about this. Can you really say, I really love my mom in the middle of an argument with her? You're yelling at her. No, right? Like, those don't make sense. You can't love and hate at the same time. You can't love and argue at the same time. That's the idea we're saying here is you want to put off the works of the flesh. Well, guess what? You got to put on love. You're going to stop gossiping. You're going to stop hating. You're going to stop being angry. You're going to stop arguing all the time. Sacrificing yourselves for other people. We got to reflect on the love of God. We got to think about what Christ sacrificed for us. We need to not only just say, wow, that's amazing, let me worship him, but now we need to prove that by our actions. Say, guess what? Because Christ did that for me, because he laid down his life for me, I'm going to lay down my life for the brothers. Think about that for a minute. If this group really did that, if everyone in this room, they caught that mission and they said, I'm going to put others' needs above my own, how great do you think this ministry would be? How great do you think our church would be if you really started doing that? Real people, really loving other people, really putting the desires of other people above themselves. This place would be a completely different place. So let that marinate, let that light a fire under you. But I want to close here with this passage, this famous passage in 1 Corinthians 13. It's obviously the probably most famous passage about love. Paul, he's trying to say here that he needs to make sure that love is the defining attribute, this defining theme of his life. And he says, this is what love now looks like in real life. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4 through 7, he says, love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy, it does not boast, it's not arrogant, it's not rude, it does not insist on its own way, it's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, it believes all things, it hopes all things, and it endures all things. And you hear that read to you right now. What's the theme do you hear? Do you hear that resonating theme of sacrifice? Being patient, sacrifice, love, or kind, that's sacrifice. Arrogant, rude, those are sacrifices that you have to make. Does not insist on its own way, that literally looks like Philippians chapter 2, putting others' needs above your own, sacrificing. Not irritable or resentful, that's a sacrifice. Rejoices with the truth, that's a sacrifice. Bears all things, that's a sacrifice. Believes all things, that's a sacrifice. Biblical love is a sacrifice. It's not about what you say, it's about what you do. So hopefully that's something that we could start making sure that we prioritize this week, this summer, and that you guys put on love this summer. You put off selfishness, you put off anger and resentment, but you put on love. Hopefully that's something that you can start doing here this summer, putting on the fruit of the Spirit, putting off the works of the flesh. Why? Because Christ sacrificed so much for you. He died so that you could be made right with him, and he died to show you what it looks like to love other people. So hopefully that's something that we could start to do right now here in this ministry, starting today. We could do it right now as soon as we're done. Start to put others' needs above our own. So let's pray right now. Let's talk to God. We'll sing one more worship song, and then we'll head out. God, we are so thankful for the love that you have shown us as we look here afresh at what you've sacrificed for us. God, it truly is amazing. Oftentimes we take it for granted. Oftentimes we sit there in our hands in our pockets like it's no big deal, but God, it is a big deal. You sacrificed your position in heaven. You sacrificed your desires, your will. You sacrificed ultimately your life so that we could be made right with you. God, we are so thankful for that amazing gift of love, that demonstration of love that you have shown us. God, I ask for help. I pray that you would help each and every person in this room to sacrifice themselves for others, putting their needs above their own, laying down their life for the sake of others. God, please help us do that. It is so hard. It is not comfortable. It is uncomfortable. God, I pray that you give us the strength to do that. God, please help us here this week. In Jesus' name, amen.